Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Goo Goo Gas and Le Big Switch. I don't know how to describe it, but more than usual for sister episodes, I see these two episodes as a pair. Like, when I think of one, I think of the other. And sure, this isn't much of a surprising thing since these are sister episodes after all, but I really want to get it across that these episodes are one unit to me. Now, why is that? Who knows? It's just something I wanted to start us out with because I couldn't think of anything else. As always, thank you for watching today's video and my videos in general, and with that, let's just get right into it. Our first episode of today is Goo Goo Gas, which, at least on the forum, is an episode that's regarded rather positively. Do I agree with that view? Well, you'll have to wait 4 or 5 minutes and see. Hey, don't be mad, I can't always spoil my reviews. I gotta keep some element of intrigue. I will say though that I am surprised that this episode is viewed so popularly, so you can take from that what you will. So, the beginning of this episode was a somewhat underwhelming demonstration of a plankton scheme, but I only say somewhat underwhelming because the failed scheme sets the atmosphere of this episode nicely, which helps me to forgive some of those underwhelming aspects. I also liked the gag where SpongeBob acted like a rocket launcher, that was fun. Seeing Plankton at the park was nice too, since we don't normally see Plankton outside of the two locations we see him, the Chum Bucket and the Krusty Krab. Plankton is inspired to come up with a new plan by watching a mother acting high-key weird towards her baby. And then I like how watching that makes Plankton be like, huh, reminds me of my mother. That explains a lot. And now, before I move on to the rest of the episode, let me say something real quick. I've never been a fan of de-aging plots, so you already know that this episode is going to be at a supreme disadvantage because of that alone. At least the babies in this episode are cute. I especially thought Mr. Krabs' baby self was adorable. Another thing this episode has going for it related to all of this is that the baby humor is not horrendous. Yes, that's a low bar to cross, but listen, I like to give credit wherever I can. I also really love how in this initial stage of Plankton's plan, we see that SpongeBob's pretty good with babies, which I find adorable. We then get a really great joke in Plankton's monologuing being heard by SpongeBob, who then calls the police. Every time Plankton monologues, I think of this scene. After Plankton escapes from the police and we get a fun moment between SpongeBob and Squidward, we then get the reappearance of Karen, who shows up just to be a queen and tell Plankton how to get his plan to work. Of course, Plankton is a bit of a fool, so that was both funny and annoying. See, you can make annoying funny if you do it right. Some episodes, past and future, take notes. After another failed attempt by Plankton to get his plan to work, which was pretty amusing, we get another unfunny old couple joke. Not really sure why they keep doing this, it never works in my opinion. Things improve when it turns out the gas is turning people into older versions of themselves instead of babies. And I love how SpongeBob comes out of nowhere because of his offense over Plankton's insult towards old people. I like to think of this as a nice little bit of continuity carried over from Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. Plankton's comment to SpongeBob was delightfully morbid, and seeing Plankton get his comeuppance in the form of old people beating him up with their canes is great. We then move on to the final attempt at babifying everyone, and this is Plankton's most successful attempt so far. The part in the bargain mart was hilarious. I'd say it's probably my favorite part of this episode, or at least one of them, since I suppose there are other parts of this episode that could qualify. Anyway, Plankton is so horrible for testing the gas out on Karen, like that is your wife, what the hell, but I thought it was neat that she turned into a calculator, and then Patrick is at the Krusty Krab for no reason, and we get the hilarious looking Patrick baby because of that. However, just like the beginning of this episode, this last part of Goo Goo Gas is kinda underwhelming, and the ending is abrupt as Sponge Baby plays with the gas, which turns Plankton into a microscopic baby, and that ends that. We can only wonder what happens from there. Goo Goo Gas is a fine episode. So yeah, I unfortunately do not agree with other people that this episode is great or amazing, largely because this episode isn't really all that funny to me. Sure, the enjoyment factor is there, but the jokes are a bit far and few in between. Not to mention that this episode missed so many opportunities to become something greater, particularly at the beginning and end of it. It's not a failure in any way, so it's not mediocre or below, but I also can't stomach putting it in good. So that is why this episode belongs in my okay tier, where it comes in with a score of 6.6 out of 10. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just okay. Following up that episode is Le Big Switch. Like its sister, this episode is not one that is super memorable and at the front of my mind all the time. It's not forgettable, but it can fade into the background at times. Not this time though, since I'm gonna spend the next 5 minutes or so talking about this one. I like the joke that begins Le Big Switch, where SpongeBob's air kiss of love makes Squidward choke. That was funny, and therefore a good note for this episode to start on. The way SpongeBob hypes up the food at the Krusty Krab is so funny to me when you think of the Krusty Krab as a stand-in for any generic burger place. Actually, let me just fully go on this tangent right now. See, when I think of what the Krusty Krab is an XP of, and yes, I'm aware I'm not using that word correctly, I don't care. Maybe illusion would be a better word, but I don't care enough to figure that out. So anyway, when I think of what the Krusty Krab is an XP of, Burger King and Wendy's are there, of course, but I usually think of more upscale burger places like Red Robin or Shake Shack, but I don't like that place at all. Okay, tangent over. So, back to what I was saying earlier. Seeing the Krusty Krab as a stand-in for a generic burger place makes SpongeBob, his love for his job and Squidward's distaste for it even funnier to me. But of course, all of this is meaningless in the case of this episode because Mr. Krabs wants to revamp the whole restaurant into a frou-frou fancy pants eatery where he can charge to high heaven for the smallest of portions. Squidward is of course happy about this, especially once he hears that Mr. Krabs has invested in the chef exchange program, which will install the Krusty Krab with a new frou-frou fancy pants chef, complete with obnoxious French accent, while SpongeBob gets shipped far away. This is all a pretty neat setup to kick off the plot, and I like it. Poor SpongeBob has his entire life changed in seconds as he's discarded from the Krusty Krab like garbage. Yeah, this is something I generally don't like seeing, but it works well enough in this episode so it doesn't bother me. This setup also leaves me with a lot of questions, such as, does SpongeBob get housing through this program? Free transportation? How far away is this restaurant? Is forcing SpongeBob into this even legal? Not that Mr. Krabs cares about legality. I bet if this required SpongeBob's signature, he would have forged it or had SpongeBob sign it with no idea of what he was doing. All very plausible. Okay, I'll stop overthinking SpongeBob SquarePants now. Anyway, I love how Squidward's like, I underestimated the power of public transportation. I am a big public transportation fan, so I loved that line. So, once SpongeBob gets shipped off, we meet the Krusty Krab's new chef, who is a French asshole, and SpongeBob goes off to work at his new restaurant, Fancy, which was previously seen in Chocolate with Nuts. This new restaurant contains a French Gordon Ramsay XP, and yes, I used that term correctly this time, so ha. I love how SpongeBob can only make Krabby Patties. To me, it makes sense that SpongeBob's not actually a great chef, but simply a great fry cook. And if I remember correctly, a similar issue arises for him in SpongeBob You're Fired, so we love some continuity. Mr. Crustacean, as that is apparently the owner's name, which I'm just now realizing is a reference to Mr. Krabs' name, is freaking hilarious. I love how unreasonably angry he is about everything. Of course, SpongeBob's able to win him over with his brilliant patty cooking skills. This is a small thing I've noticed, but I really love how Season 5 has emphasized just how great SpongeBob is at making patties, and I'd like to think that throughout this season we're witnessing a character arc of sorts, even though those largely don't exist in this show. Of SpongeBob improving his patty making starting in the original Fry Cook, cause now it's like he's reaching the level of gym patties. And it's always nice to see SpongeBob win after he's been cast aside, just like in Patty Hype. In the meantime, Mr. Krabs and by extension Squidward are struggling. Things aren't turning out the way Mr. Krabs thought at all, because it turns out he can't pull his typical cutting corners nonsense this time. The disdain the chef has for Mr. Krabs is just too funny. And I suppose while I'm here, I'll take the time to say that Le Big Switch is not particularly funny, despite me just talking about another funny moment, but that's because the chef being unreasonably pretentious is humorous. Anyway, this episode is entertaining even if it isn't the funniest, so you're not hearing any complaints from me. And then I love how the exchange program must last like a day or something because SpongeBob realizes it's time for him to go back to the Krusty Krab despite him never being told he'd go back. And so when he leaves, he takes all the Krabby Patties with him. It's even funnier to think that this program only lasted a day because we suddenly cut to Mr. Krabs, who is apparently bankrupt and getting all of his stuff repossessed, even at his house. Even Squidward is repossessed, which is so horrible. And I love how Mr. Krabs thinks he's hallucinating SpongeBob's voice as some kind of weird manifestation of his conscience. Speaking of, I do like that Mr. Krabs is actually upset that he turned away SpongeBob and lost everything. It shows that he has some kind of morality or empathy, even though his focus is still on himself here. And then of course we turn back to the status quo with Mr. Krabs being better off than before with all of his new rich clientele, and we get a good repeat of the gag from earlier with Squidward choking on love. A great ending to this episode. Le Big Switch is a good episode, I'd say. It's not particularly funny in general, and most of its humor is in retrospective hilarity more than anything, but this episode is still entertaining and never quite boring. And so all of this together is why this episode fits best in my good tier, where it comes in with a score of 7.6 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. I don't have very many since these two episodes aren't ones that I really think about very often, but I guess I do have one little thing. I talked about this when I originally reviewed these episodes on the forum, but I don't know what the Season 5 DVDs were on when they were made, but for some reason Goo Goo Gas was on disc 4 of the Season 5 DVDs instead of on disc 3 of its sister, and actually the DVDs are all sorts of screwed up in this regard, having episodes in random places on the DVDs instead of production order. I wonder why that is. Anyway, my other closing thought is more of a tease, because y'all know what episode is next, right? No? Well, let me tell you, it's Atlantis Squarepantis, and I'm excited because I made the graphics for that video and I'm quite happy with them. And also because this is an episode that people have lots of opinions about. But let me leave all that to the actual review, and let me go ahead and end this one, and I'll see y'all next time when I review Atlantis Squarepantis.